Well, picture this. You spend all your savings on your forever home and move in. Life's good until you're told your new house is being repossessed. That's what's happened to Emma and Mark, a young couple now caught up in a legal nightmare.
We love this house. We want to stay here. We want to do everything possible to stay here. It feels like home.
I can't do nothing about it. It's out of my hands.
I've pretty much lost all hope at the moment.
Imagine this. You've spent every dollar you've saved to buy your forever home. You've moved your 3 young children inside, and then one day, a legal notice arrives telling you the house is being repossessed and you never actually owned it at all. Emma and Mark, a young couple from Sydney's western outskirts, are living that nightmare right now. And what makes it even more devastating is that they did everything they thought was right. They hired a conveyancer. They got their finances in order, they signed a contract, and they moved in believing settlement was just a formality. But months later, they're facing eviction from a property they were promised, a property they paid for, a property that was never truly theirs. Emma later said, "We've saved up all of our money to buy a house that we can spend our forever in." And that single sentence captures the heartbreak of a family who believed they were building a future, but were instead walking into a legal and financial trap.
It is a legal and financial mess.
What does this house mean to you?
We've saved up all of our money to buy a house that, we can spend our forever in, I guess.
The dream home started turning into sort of a fantasy.
If you want to stay informed about how these scams unfold and how to protect yourself and your loved ones, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we break down real cases with verified facts so you can see the warning signs before it's too late. This story is a chilling reminder that scammers and unscrupulous sellers often target everyday people, especially those who trust the system. And the betrayal frequently comes not from a stranger in a dark alley, but from someone who appears legitimate, someone who holds a position of trust, someone who knows exactly how to exploit the gaps in the process. Emma and Mark's ordeal began in Silverdale, a quiet suburb in Sydney's western outskirts, where families settle for space and stability. And in the year leading up to their purchase, they had done what so many young Australian families do. They saved aggressively, sold their previous home, and stretched their budget to secure a house listed for approximately $1.35 million. The price was steep, but they believed it was manageable over time, and they had no reason to suspect the transaction was anything other than routine.
From the get-go, it's been difficult to get in contact with them. So it took probably about a week until they accepted our offer.
They engaged a conveyancer, arranged finance, and entered into a contract with the seller. And at the outset, everything appeared to follow the standard residential property process. Communication with the seller was slower than expected, taking about a week before their offer was even accepted. But delays like that are common and didn't raise immediate alarm. Once the offer was accepted, contracts were exchanged, settlement was scheduled, and because Emma and Mark had already sold their previous home, they were granted early access to the Silverdale property, moving in with their children the day before settlement was supposed to occur. Early access arrangements are not unheard of and are often granted when settlement appears imminent and procedural, so the couple had no reason to believe this was unusual. They moved their belongings in, started living there as a family, and began planning their future in what they believed would soon be legally theirs. 2 days before the scheduled settlement date, the first cracks appeared.
Emma, were you at any stage suspicious early in the piece?
And everything started rolling, and everything from there went smoothly right up until we were supposed to settle.
Emma and Mark were informed that some documents on the seller's side had not been signed or finalized, and when the seller requested a short extension to complete the paperwork, the couple agreed, viewing it as a minor delay rather than a red flag.
I guess when we were told that the caveat on the property hadn't lifted and there was paperwork that hadn't been done, we weren't overly surprised.
Shortly afterward, their conveyancer contacted them with more concerning news. a caveat had been placed on the property title, which is a legal notice that restricts dealings with a property until certain claims are resolved. The couple was told the caveat had been lifted and that outstanding paperwork was still being finalized, so they weren't overly surprised. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the delays continued and further investigation revealed something far more troubling.
I don't think on their side of the fence they've done anything wrong whatsoever. Very, very common to have a mortgage on the title. Less so with caveats, but they certainly exist on title. They're not uncommon.
There were 2 outstanding mortgages secured against the home, as well as another caveat meaning multiple financial interests existed on the title, each with its own legal standing, and none of them had been cleared. Industry representatives later explained that while it's common for properties to be sold with a mortgage in place, the combination of multiple mortgages and caveats significantly complicates a transaction because each interest must be discharged before a clear title can be transferred. For Emma and Mark, this meant settlement could not proceed until those conditions were satisfied.
And we knew there was issues. We still had high hopes, but it was the start of the downfall.
Pastor Nuno.
Yeah.
Simon Boda from A Current Affair.
Okay.
I'm here just to ask you a couple of questions about the house you and your wife flipped out at Silverdale.
I haven't flipped it yet.
Okay.
So I've got
what happens
nothing
to this couple if they get evicted?
I'm not sure. We're trying to solve it now. The lender that I went with, it's taken them 8 months to lend me the money.
And throughout this period, the seller, who was later identified as a clergyman associated with a Sydney-based church, maintained that he was attempting to refinance the property and that delays were caused by his lender, which he claimed had taken several months to provide the funds needed to discharge one of the mortgages. He told them to hold on, that it was out of his hands, that he was trying to solve it. But the situation on the ground did not change. The outstanding mortgages remained and the legal barriers to settlement persisted. As the months dragged on, Emma and Mark realized the complexity of the situation required specialist legal advice. So they engaged a property lawyer. And that marked a turning point because it became clear that the issues were not simply administrative delays, but structural problems tied to the property's financial encumbrances. The couple learned that the interests held by the mortgage holders and caveat holders had priority, and that these parties had enforceable rights independent of the sale contract, which meant that even though Emma and Mark had a signed agreement, the mortgage lender's claims came first. The primary mortgagee, whose loans were not being serviced or resolved, took action through the Supreme Court.
No one can get in contact with him. For the last maybe month, he's gone completely.
They're a young couple with 3 children.
Look, I've got a family with 3 children as well. I will never want any of that to happen for anybody.
And the court ultimately issued a repossession order granting the lender the right to take possession of the property. Emma and Mark became aware of this when a formal notice was delivered to the house addressed not to them as owners, but to the occupier, reflecting the fact that legal title had never transferred. More than halfway through the process, they believed would result in home ownership, they were confronted with the reality that despite paying a deposit, selling their previous home, and moving their family in, they did not legally own the house. The Supreme Court order meant the first mortgagee was entitled to repossess and ultimately sell the property regardless of the sale contract Emma and Mark had signed, and this was not framed as a discretionary decision or a failure of an individual actor at that stage. It was the result of established property and lending laws operating as designed, because mortgages with registered interests have priority over purchasers who have not completed settlement. Emma and Mark explored options to challenge or delay the outcome, but their legal advice made clear that their ability to intervene was limited, and deadlines imposed by the court and the rights of the mortgagee left little room for reversal. The seller continued to state he was attempting to resolve the situation through refinancing, but communication from him became sporadic, and at times ceased altogether, and by the end, there was no longer a clear pathway to settlement. The couple was informed they could remain in the property until the mortgagee placed the house on the market, which was expected to occur in January, but this was a temporary measure, not a restoration of ownership or long-term security. Regarding their financial position, they were told their deposit would be returned if settlement did not occur, but this did not account for the broader disruption they had experienced, including the sale of their previous home, the costs of moving, and the uncertainty surrounding their housing situation. Emma said it best when she confronted the seller. "If you were just honest at the beginning, then at least we would have moved on and kept looking." And that honesty, that transparency, was what they deserved but never received. Emma and Mark have not lost the house through personal default or non-payment, but through the operation of a system that prioritizes registered mortgages and legal interests over the dreams and plans of ordinary buyers. If this story has shown you anything, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can continue to see verified, fact-based breakdowns of cases like this that expose how financial and property systems can fail everyday people. Share this video widely so others can learn from Emma and Mark's experience and recognize the warning signs before it's too late. The lesson here is clear: trust but verify. Never assume the process is complete until settlement actually occurs. Never move in early, and always get independent legal advice when anything seems delayed or complicated. Protect yourself, protect your family, and understand that in property law, possession is not ownership, and a signed contract is not a guarantee. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember that the best defense against scams and exploitation is knowledge, transparency, and the courage to ask hard questions before you hand over your life savings. This is the reality of what can happen when the system fails to protect the vulnerable, and it's a reality we all need to understand.